I see a lot of videos on YouTube by atheists who are just making particular videos. Usually not people who are scholars or any type of situation like that. Just ordinary people who are atheists who come out with certain videos bashing Christianity, usually Christianity, for whatever reasons. And that's fine. Everybody has their chance to voice their opinion. That's what YouTube is about. That's, we should be able to voice our opinions. We should be able to talk about things that we believe in or not believe in, and be given a fair opportunity to do so. I really believe in that, and I think that it would be a shame if rights were taken away, as there are in other countries where you're not allowed to voice your opinion on a particular thing. But anyway, regardless of that, I see these videos out there by these atheists, just common folk, and one of the arguments that they come with is that Christianity, in particular Jesus, was just borrowed mythology from mythological beings, from Egyptian type of ancient Egyptian or other different parts of the world, and they try to match up particular things with mythological beings with Jesus, and try to claim that, well, Jesus, the idea of Jesus, all the things that are being mentioned of him are all borrowed from these mythological beings. Now, at face value, one would look at that, if they are not educated in any particular area of that type of thing, mythology, or haven't really studied the facts, will take that at face value. And even a lot of young people will look at it and say, oh, well, yeah, I've heard this, and there's probably some truth to it, in a sense. However, the problem is, when you go into the academic field, whether it be mythology, historian, Greco-Roman history, scholars who are in that field, whether they're secular or Christian, unitarily, they will say that there's no argument to this. It's just completely false to say that Jesus or his disciples borrowed this type of mythological stories from other cultures, etc. And here's a few reasons why. First of all, when you have to go to the sources. You have to go to the original sources. You have to go to, say, the Book of the Dead. You have to go to hieroglyphics type of things, where you have to read the translations, the direct translations of the hieroglyphics. Obviously, we don't read Egyptian hieroglyphics, so we have to read what the professionals say. Do your homework. Research what scholars from these particular fields are saying, because they're all saying the same thing. They're saying, I'll give you an example. Bart Ehrman. I like Bart Ehrman. Even though Bart Ehrman is adamantly against Jesus being God, he's very honest with a lot of his arguments. Some arguments he needs to stick in the scholarly field, and he shouldn't be, presenting these things to the general public, because a lot of times the general public don't know both sides of certain arguments, especially when it comes to textual criticism and things like that. But they can be explained. But regardless of that, Bart Ehrman himself, he believes that Jesus was a real person in the first century. He believed he was a Jew. He believed he was, they considered him a prophet. They believed that he died on the cross. Majority of scholars out there believe this. There's only a select few people that don't, or mythicists or whatever. One of them being Richard Carrier as one example. But he goes completely against the grain of even atheists who also admit who are in that particular field, whether or a field that's very related to mythology and all these different types of things with history, and they all say the same thing. You just can't borrow these things and insert them with the storyline of Jesus. They just don't fit, because when you look at the originals, you realize that a lot of this stuff is fabricated, and a lot of it is fabricated well after Jesus has left the earth, basically within 150. I think the Mithras, especially the story of the Mithra, that you don't find that until 150 years, 150 AD, well after Jesus. So you have to look at that. You have to look at the sources. You're going to hear, people are getting their information from, was it Zygest or what? Zeragest, or I don't even know the movie. They're getting it from particular movies. They're also getting it from books with people who are certainly not qualified to even write about these things, because they're just ignorant of history. They're ignorant of what's going on. And a lot of times they don't even get Jesus right. For instance, they try to associate Jesus' birth date with another god. And basically they say Jesus' birth date was on the 25th. Well, we know historically that that's not the case. Jesus' birthday was not on the 25th. It was just the Roman Catholic Church decided to put that birth date there to offset the winter solstice festival that the pagans were using. You can just research for yourself. You'll see what it's what's going on there. Another case is Jews in the first century, Second Temple Judaism. Historically, any historian will tell you that there was no evidence whatsoever of Jews, specifically Orthodox Jews, having anything to do with pagan mythology. It just wasn't there. So to suggest that the disciples were adapting to mythological type of stuff is just completely erroneous. They were thinking in Judaish terms. They were thinking in Judaish history and that sort of thing. So that there's no way of fitting that type of thing in there as well. Another thing you could look at is some of the virgin birth stories. Well, I don't know if it was Osiris. I can't remember who it was. I should actually be looking at this stuff again just to refresh myself. But one of those guys was born out of a rock. Well, that's not a virgin birth. Yet they say that it's very close to what the story of Jesus is with the virgin birth. Well, I don't see that at all. Another thing we have to look at is the storyline of Jesus, the whole message of Jesus coming to die for for the world, for his people first, but for the world itself. The whole storyline behind Jesus doesn't start with Jesus. It starts much earlier. I mean, you look at Moses, you look at Esther, you look at Isaiah, all these prophecies that were in line with who Jesus was and what he was representing goes further back, 1500. Last thing I want to talk about is when Paul is talking on Mars Hill in Acts 17 in the Bible, Acts 17 verses 19 and 20, he's speaking to the people of Athens, and these people are worshiping every god imaginable. They know all about the mythological gods, and they know all the details about these things. But it's interesting that when he's presenting the gospel to them, they said to him, "What is this new thing that you're saying? We want to know more about it. Teach us more about this particular God that you're talking about." And what's striking is that ideally, if Jesus' story was borrowed from these mythological beings, certainly that would have been a perfect time for them to say, "Oh, wait a minute, Paul. We already heard about these things. We already know about this from the god of Osiris or the god of this or the god of that." And certainly they would have said, that's phony baloney. You're just borrowing from the storylines of our gods. But no, they don't say that. They said, what is this new thing? This is something that has never been heard from them before, which presupposes that Christianity, the story of Jesus, is a new thing when it comes to these people who are mythicists in a sense. And so when you look at it nowadays too, the mythicists, that are out there, a lot of them just simply ignore history. They ignore, when you're going back to the proper references when it comes to these things with these certain gods. And as I said before, a lot of these, majority of scholars out there in these particular fields, who have been studying these things for all their life and are educated in these types of things, they're saying there's no connection whatsoever. And like I was mentioning about Bart Ehrman, who is an agnostic. He's a guy who's, militarily against Jesus being God, and that the theological storyline behind Jesus, although he admits all the other things about Jesus as far as history is concerned. But he says himself, he doesn't understand where these modern day mythists are coming from. What is their agenda? Why are they so adamant about these things when we look at history and it's so blatantly obvious that there's zero connection to Jesus and these mythological beings? So do your homework, because it's not coming from me. This is coming from people who are educated in this field. Don't sit there and there's so many videos out there. I could name so many videos I've seen where these well-meaning people, just ordinary people, who are adamantly against God, they're atheists, and they just spew out this stuff because they watched it in a movie, or they heard it or read it in some book, or they heard it from somebody else, or heard it from another video. So they just spew out the same things over and over again. They're doing true research on this particular topic. And like I said, if anyone can give me an original source that backs up their claim that Jesus was actually borrowing from mythological beings, I'd like to see it. And I know so would these other scholars, because they're all saying the same thing. And I'm not talking about Christian scholars here. That's the first thing an atheist is going to say when he's just talking about Christians. No, I'm not. I'm talking about agnostics, atheists, who are historians in the Greco-Roman era, even some mythicists, but people who are generally educated in this particular field. They're saying the same thing I am. So why are we spewing this stuff out? Why are we spewing it out? Because it's advantageous to atheists. It's an argument that they can make. They just want to throw things out to disrupt the beliefs of Christians out there, and people who are on the fence and don't know what to believe, in a sense, and who don't have the time to research these things. Anyway, I hope this helps. And like I said, go to the original sources. Read some of the people who are actually credible in those particular fields. And they're going to tell you these things that I'm saying too as well. I still research it too. I'm still looking into things too as well myself. But what I've come across is that there's no parallels at all in this. It's vastly different from mythology. And not only that, historically, all historians, majority of historians out there admit Jesus was a real person. And all the storyline that you find in the Gospels, they were autobiographies of a real person who was living in the first century in Palestine. There's no debate in this. There's zero debate in this. I'm telling you right now on that. Look at any credible historian out there. They're going to tell you this stuff. So that being said, take care.